Good day and welcome to this episode of Focus On. My name is Kamo Mosipele. The 2025 U.S Africa Business Summit, now in its 17th year, is scheduled to take place from 22 to 25 June in Luanda, Angola. The premier annual event serves as a crucial platform for strengthening economic partnerships between the United States and African nations. The summit will gather high-level decision makers and key resources from both American and African businesses. Joining me for more to discuss this further is Flory Lazier, the President and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us once again to give us a preview ahead of the U.S. Africa Business Summit. Now, it is returning to the African soil. Just walk us through the reason on choosing the host, which is Angola.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to CNBC Africa. You are a great partner of ours and actually have been with us for a number of years for our U.S. Africa Business Summit. It is the premier event that Corporate Council on Africa has been doing for decades now. And in the early years, we did it every other year, and we went from the U.S. and then back to Africa. But that meant we were only on the continent every 4 years. And the Africans actually came to us and said, you've got to be here more often. What we're doing and the work that we're promoting in terms of U.S. Africa trade, investment, and business, commercial engagement is too important. So we made the decision then that we would have the summit every year, and that way we would be on the continent at least every other year. Recently, though, we've actually been having the pattern of 2 on the continent and then back in the U.S. And so we're very, very happy to be coming to Angola, Luanda, Angola in 2025. Why Angola? Well, first of all, we appreciate the leadership, President Lorenzo. He this year is actually the chair of the African Union. And so it's not only about Angola and all of the incredible opportunities there in the Angolan market, but it's really also about African leadership. And he is playing a leadership role. And then, of course, they are also celebrating the 50th anniversary of their independence. So it's also just a great time to come to celebrate Angola, but also to celebrate the African continent and all that's happening in many countries across the continent. For many of CCA's member companies that are in all the key sectors of growth, energy and infrastructure and agriculture and agribusiness and cybersecurity, ICT, et cetera, and health, Africa is a growing market for U.S. businesses. And so we're very pleased to be on the continent and to be partnering with the government of Angola, which is celebrating a very special year for them and for their leadership, and to join them in that on the continent.
Sure. But when we take a look back, I know last year it was hosted in Dallas, Texas, and over 1,800 participants were in attendance and major deals were signed off. But when we then take a look at it happening this year, what are some of the expectations that are expected to come out of this year's edition?
Well, as you said, in 2024 in Dallas, we had a great turnout and the opportunity to focus on one of the major regional infrastructure projects on the continent, which is the Libido Corridor. And there were deals that were signed over $1 billion in deals related to Libido, as well as other deals that were signed in projects across the continent. This year is an opportunity to bring new leadership from the United States, the new Trump administration, to bring those people to Angola and to be able to focus on the steps that are needed, not only for the Libido Corridor project, which is advancing, but also to look at other regional projects that are available for investment across the continent. And again, this is a great time to be looking at Africa and what it offers to America. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, and we're looking at growing that relationship through projects like the Libido Corridor.
Sure. I really want to piggyback on the answer that you've just given me. One, you've made mention of the Trump administration, but also the position of Africa as a growing market. We know as well with the G20 presidency as well is the opportunity for Africa to set the tone on the global stage. When we bring these two significant events, both from the US side and Africa together, what is the sentiment towards strengthening the relationship between the US and Africa amidst some of the turbulence likened to the trade and tariff escalations that have been happening?
Yes, well, I think, people have been focused on what's been happening in terms of the new tariffs that have been put in place for many of the African countries that are eligible for the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which allows thousands of African products to come into the US market. It does indeed cause some concern. But just this past week, when the finance ministers of many of the African countries were in Washington, D.C., for the World Bank IMF meetings, Corporate Council on Africa was pleased to host a meeting with a number of finance ministers to discuss the tariffs and also to discuss AGOA and its potential renewal. And we do know that there is support in Congress, the U.S. Congress. There's support of both parties for renewal of AGOA. And CCA, we have been working with many others to push that renewal. We believe it's even more important now because we do have the 10% tariffs. And so those tariffs sit on top of zero for many of the African products that are entering the US market. But of course, if AGOA is not renewed, then the Africans would be facing much tougher entry into the market. And we have to remember the reason that we put AGOA in place 25 years ago. It has survived through both Republican and Democratic leadership in the White House and on Capitol Hill. And so we're taking a positive view about this. We believe that before September 30th, hopefully before September 30th, when it is scheduled to end, that there will be a renewal of AGOA, because I think that the administration will see that there are many benefits to U.S. buyers. And at that meeting we held last week, we had major buyers like Levi Strauss and J.C. Penney and DTLR and others who depend on African goods to diversify their supply chains. And truthfully, if we're not going to get those products from Africa, well, where will we be getting them from? Where will our merchants get those products from for the U.S. market? So in order to make sure that they have a wide pool of suppliers, and Africa is certainly well poised to do that across many products, critical minerals, cocoa, shea, apparel, we need to even oil that gets shipped to the U.S. Benefits from AGOA and duty-free access. So again, I think that there's a bit of turmoil now. We recognize that, but I think there are many people, both within the administration and on the Hill, who recognize that we need to push past this period and settle into what is a mutually beneficial relationship between African nations and the United States.
I like the point that you've made in terms of ensuring that both parties are cohesive, there's cohesion, and driving forward economic collaboration. But as we continue on that front, when these inroads are being made, when there is an establishment of a mutually beneficial relationship, what are then some of the key investment areas that will be top of mind, or the prime focus that will be prioritized at this event?
Well, there's so many sectors of growth on the continent that are also important for the U.S. But let's start with health, just as an example. I think many of us recall what happened during the COVID pandemic, and there was a need to diversify supply chains, not just in the health sector, but in many sectors, semiconductors, white goods, batteries for cars. And so as a result, there has been a shifting that's been happening since the pandemic to look for other places where producers and manufacturers can rely on their partners and have access to the products that are needed. And so with the Africans having now the African Continental Free Trade Area, that gives them one of the largest free trade markets in the world, which means goods can move across all the continent. So you can have access to the raw materials, the intermediate materials, and then determine where is best to make the final products that get shipped, not just to the US, but around the world. And so, again, I think that health is one of the areas, healthcare products, medical equipment, pharmaceuticals. That's an area where there has already been some shifting and growth in that partnership between the US and Africa. I think that there are also other sectors. I mentioned automobiles, but the Africans have a strategy under the AFCFTA for the auto sector and auto parts. And I think this is an area where there will be room for growth in terms of US manufacturers and really the global manufacturers of cars beyond the US manufacturers that can look to Africa to partner with them there. I think also in the digital area, digitalization and ICT is a critical area for growth and innovation. And Africa, I think, is leading in innovation in a number of ways. I know the first place that I saw mobile banking was actually on the continent. So we have partnerships there. And then I'll end on, in terms of sectors, I think agribusiness is clearly one where the United States can offer its technologies and innovation to partner with Africa. Africa has 60% of all the arable land in the world that is not being cultivated at the moment.
While the opportunities are abundant and the agreements and major deals that will come out of this summit are not only far-reaching in the sectors that it will cover, but the impact across these two very valuable global players. But that's unfortunately where we have to wrap it up. Thank you so much to my guest. That was Flory Lizea, the President and CEO of Corporate Council on Africa, for joining me on what can be expected at the 2025 U.S. Africa Business Summit. From me, Kiamo Mosipili, and the rest of the team, it's until next time.